We are live. My name is David, and today is September 9th, 2011, and I'm with Yoko, and Yoko is about to interview me. This is a video recording of my responses in this interview.
Okay, could you please tell me your experience as a teacher and how long and where did you teach?
I've been teaching for, how would I describe this? I've been teaching since 2002. No, let me say that again. I've been teaching since 2003. When I first graduated from university, that summer, I taught part-time in a school in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Oh, New Jersey.
Yeah. And then that fall, I came to Hong Kong, and I worked as an English language teaching assistant at a school in Tin Shui Wai, Hong Kong. After that year, I spent a year at a DSS school as a non-local teacher in Tongchong. Then I spent a year as a local teacher in an aided school in Taiwan. And then I spent 2 years at an aided school in Yamate. Then I spent 2 years as an instructor at a university in Hong Kong. Now I work part-time as a lecturer in one university in Hong Kong. I also work part-time as a lecturer in another university in Hong Kong. In the former, I teach English. In the latter, I teach argumentation. So I have taught English, history, and computer studies at the secondary school level. I've taught English and argumentation at the university level and postgraduate level. I've taught in my career primary school students part-time. In the main, most of my experience is at secondary school and at the university level with undergraduate students, though I have taught postgraduates as well.
I see. There's one question. You said that you first worked in Hong Kong as non-local teacher, but after teaching two schools, you became the local teacher here. What does it mean by non-local and local teacher?
I think that determines the remuneration. That suggests the kinds of terms that I received. So as a non-local teacher, I received a housing allowance, and I received a gratuity after completing my contract, but I didn't receive it because I resigned. So I think that is how the contract was worded by this DSS school, so that they could provide me with the housing allowance and these fringe benefits. When I say I was a local teacher at some of the other schools that I worked at, that means I didn't receive these fringe benefits. I was just like everyone else in the school.
So it doesn't mean that, I misunderstood. Non-local teacher and local teacher, the difference will be, those teachers who can teach the subject. School subject will be the local teacher, and non-local teacher will be those language teachers. That's my first understanding, but actually it is not.
Yeah, I'm not sure if these terms have been standardized in Hong Kong. They're definitely standardized in schools, but at the territory-wide level, I'm not sure if there's such standardization. I mean, there is like a net scheme, right?
Let's give me what did it stand for?
Native
Native
English teacher.
teacher.
Yeah, even that isn't necessarily standardized. The contract for that is not standardized across the territory. In Hong Kong in general, there are all kinds of terms that are thrown around, not least because there's so much flexibility in what you can do in hiring teachers.
Okay, then you have experience of teaching in the States and Hong Kong as well. And what do you think of the teachers' workload here compared to others?
I don't have that much experience teaching in the United States. I barely any experience. It's hard for me to tell.
Then in that case, what do you think of the teachers' workload, especially in secondary school?
In an absolute sense, just based on my own impression in my own life, there is a lot of work. And a lot of the work has nothing to do with teaching and learning. A lot of the work is administrative. A lot of the work goes towards fulfilling the notion that effort leads to success, not ability. For example, when I was a teacher in a secondary school, not only did I have to go into a classroom for a set amount of time, like a class, 40 minutes, I would also have to, for example, be a security guard. I'd have to walk around after school for an hour, 2 hours at a time. I would also be a class teacher. That would mean I would have to be a babysitter as well. I would have to sit with the class in the morning. I would have to lead them around after school or to assemblies. I would have to sit with them at lunchtime sometimes.
Excuse me, you were teaching at secondary school, right?
Yes.
Do you still say babysitting?
I'm using the term babysitting. I'm a chaperone. I'm their security guard.
I see.
I've also been an accountant. I've had to collect money from students, distribute books and account for costs. I've had to be a counselor, talking to students, also calling parents. I've had to do so many things.
Do you also have to do extracurricular activities?
Oh yes, I had to do that as well. So I've had to do so many things that I think in the main are not directly related to teaching and learning. The actual time that students spend in class with a teacher with the express purpose of learning and teaching. And a real problem in changing education here in Hong Kong and just changing education in general is that teachers don't have time to change. The whole system is rigged so that it's hard to change because you're too busy putting out small fires, calling parents, collecting money, being a security guard, attending meetings, that you actually have no time to plan lessons, and more tragically, you have no time to reflect on your teaching, which leads to improvement. But when there's no reflection, there's no improvement.
But actually, government asks teachers to do the improvement, and the materials are ready in the government office, and the teachers. Yesterday, I just went to the Kowloon Teachers Resource Center. That's for teachers to come to pick up their resources, but they do not have time.
Yeah, they don't have time. That's too bad. I think a good comparison would be to compare a teacher, a random teacher in a random aided school in Hong Kong, with a random teacher selected from an international school in Hong Kong. I think that would be a very useful comparison to log what they do with their time at work, what they're actually doing. That would be a beautiful comparison because it's indicative in totally different systems and ways of doing. I would suspect.
The teachers in international schools, they are also busy too, but yes. they have, today I'm working day and tomorrow I'm off, then they just enjoy their lives. Asian teachers, as you say, that even off days they work.
Yes.
That would be the difference.
So it also explains that they're doing different types of things while at work. See, that's the other thing that I think you would notice if you compared these two random people within these two groups, that you actually look at their log sheet from 8 a.m. to like 4 p.m. What they're actually doing is different. And that has implications as to whether or not they work at home. Because sometimes they actually don't have work to bring home. So I did a lot of work at home when I was
teaching here.
In the secondary school level. And this was because there was continuous assessment, and continuous assessment is interpreted in such a way that I had like 200 books to mark at the end of every week. And again, assessment is done for the sake of assessment without the time for reflection, for students to reflect, for class to reflect, for other teachers to reflect together, which leads to improvement. Assessment is done for the sake of assessment. I'll offer a comparison. When I was at the university level, I was as busy as I was in secondary school, but I was doing things that were more related to teaching and learning. And because I could do that, I actually became a much better teacher. And I wasn't taking work home because, again, what I was actually doing. Going back to the secondary school example, of course you have to take books home if you don't have time to mark books in school. And why don't you have time to mark books in school? Because you have to be a classroom teacher, you have to be a security guard, you have to call people, you have to attend meetings, you have to do things, you sit in assemblies, you have to do things.
Were you in upper secondary or lower secondary?
In the main, I taught lower secondary, Forms 1, 2, and 3. I have taught Forms 6 and 7, 4, and 5.
I felt that those teachers having classes for Form 6 or Form up to now, they have a Form 7. This year will be the last year to have the Form 7, right? I think.
Is this the final year, or was
final
last year
year.
The final year?
Oh,
Is this the final year?
This is the final year,
This
and the
is the
coming
final
the very beginning of the new.
HKDSE.
I think so. And next year, the university will have duplicated number.
Yeah, the double cohort.
Double.
Yes. Yeah.
So those teachers must have higher pressure because they have to let the students sit for the exam.
Can you say that question again?
Oh, sorry. Those teachers having classes for Form 6 or Form 7, those cohort preparing for the exams, they have heavier pressure, might be.
I think whether or not you have pressure is an individual choice.
Oh, I see. But it was a pressure for teachers in China. All the teachers in Form 7 or the final year in high school, they were under extremely high pressure.
Yes. I'm sure that's the truth. I'm also sure that being in that kind of environment where you believe there's pressure and people keep talking about pressure makes people believe that there is pressure.
I see.
Because in comparison, I'll compare my experience at the university level and secondary school level in Hong Kong. I was working very long hours at the university level too, but I didn't feel pressure at all. I really enjoyed what I was doing. Now, quantitatively, I was working long hours too. But again, it was what I was doing that did not make me feel as if I had pressure. And I'm around people too who don't talk in those terms.
Oh, I see.
That affects how you perceive things as well.
Maybe because you are doing what you really like. That makes you happy working. And
yes. That I am able to do that. It provides that sense of efficacy. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. And I think I had some other. Yeah. In Hong Kong, many teachers commit suicide.
I think many people in general commit suicide in Hong Kong. It's like
only
3.5 a day or something.
I can't remember when it was, but there was a newspaper article saying that again, no, within 1 month or so, Hong Kong teachers commit suicide. No, quite a number of teachers commit suicide because they have heavy workload. No, this is another question.
I can comment on that if you want. I think it's not just teachers. People just commit suicide. I think this is because people don't know how to manage their lives, and they don't know if there's support for them in their lives. That's why people kill themselves. At least that's my impression. People don't understand that they have a support network. People don't know if they have one, how they can access it, and people cannot step back and look at their lives from a macro perspective and see that what's happening in this instance is just a small blip on the radar. That everything that we do, by and large, is our own choice. We can just quit our job. But I think people don't realize this. When people, again, are lonely or isolated, they don't have a support network, they can't step back and realize, well, I have choices. And unfortunately, people kill themselves because it's a failure of the system to provide support. And in the case of a school, you can't provide support because everyone's too busy putting out small fires in the school. That's sad.
I just remember the question I wanted to ask you was the language assessment for teachers.
Oh, great, yeah, LPAT.
That one is only for English teachers and the Pudonghua teachers, right?
I think so.
And you sit for that exam?
Yes, I sat for it twice. The first time I failed.
Why?
There was this grammar explanation section, and I failed that part. I passed everything else, but I failed that grammar explanation section. If you want, I still have the records in my office. You can get a photocopy if you'd like of my records. And the next time I took the test, I studied that section intensively, and I passed that well, and I passed with distinction. But I didn't learn anything. I mean, it's just a test. It's not the best way to assess whether a teacher is competent, I believe.
Can you think of another way to test the competence of teachers?
Having a true professional development system in a school tests people's confidence. Taking away teacher tenure, taking away permanent staff improves teachers' competence. Why? Because they're in a less secure position. I think there are all sorts of problems that are system-wide with the mechanisms, incentive mechanisms, also with just the mentality, the way people think about things. People think too much in terms of tests, paper tests. People don't realize that maybe holistic professional development, not only about teaching and learning, but just about being a good person, is important. Again, these are large challenges to introduce, grand challenges to introduce into a complex system, and that's hard to do. People like tests, so whether or not they're effective, it doesn't matter. People like tests.
People like tests, but because it's easier to check or to say you are qualified or not, because it comes out in figures.
Yes, it's a convenient assessment, but it's not a valid assessment, and that would be my argument. It doesn't actually tell you, or it's not a good predictor of whether or not someone is actually a good teacher, or even a competent teacher, because a test can be studied. A test is not someone in a classroom. A test is you sitting down for 3 hours and writing on a piece of paper. That is not what teaching and learning is like in a classroom. The teacher does not go into a classroom for 40 minutes and write a piece of paper. I mean, that isn't what teaching is about. So, I mean, there are all kinds of mentalities that keep the system as it is. And most people are liars because they say that they want to change the system, there are problems with the system, but most people in their hearts aren't willing to change. That's all. I mean, that's the bottom line. You will, if you go ask anyone in a secondary school that, can they change the system? Is the system working well? Maybe many people will tell you that it's not working well, but they themselves are not consecrating their hearts in such a way to actually change the system, at least by themselves. They're just hypocrites. This is like espouse theory versus theory in use, right? What you actually tell someone is not actually what you do. But that might be worth checking out too. You can triangulate your data in that way. Because even this whole thing about doing all of this superfluous work in schools, people complain about it all the time. I got these duties and stuff, but no one's willing to take a stand. People just suck it up and call themselves small potatoes. I mean, in my experience.
Because you want to stand up and voice out, then that will increase their burden.
I think that's a choice to feel whether or not you want pressure. You want pressure? Fine. If you want to view it as an opportunity to free yourself or to, empower people to make a real difference, then you can feel that way too. I could choose to feel pressured in talking to you right now. I could feel like, whoa, I'm very nervous, or I'm not willing to do this. But I don't feel that way at all. Why? Because I make a choice.
That's your way of thinking.
Yes. I choose not to feel intimidated by you and by this interview. But again, this is about, what is this about? This is about people in a system with predisposed ways of doing it. It's just hard to change these things. I wanted to share one final thing. People complain about doing all this superfluous work in like a primary, secondary school in Hong Kong. But they also have a very core belief that not ability, but effort leads to success. So it's only fair that everyone works hard. It's only fair that we create more work for people just so we can distribute it evenly amongst people. I think if you talk to people about their experiences and you ask them, why do you need this? Why do you need to walk around like a security guard for 3 hours after school once a week? Or why do you need to sit in the assembly for 2 hours? Or why do you need to attend X amount of meetings? Well, maybe they'll come up with some reasons.
Yeah. Excuse me, did you say that you walk around for 3 hours after school?
I can show you the documents, yes. I actually
3
had...
hours.
I think I had to walk around until 6 o'clock. Don't quote... Well, okay, well...
Oh,
I will show you the documents. Well, I mean...
Because it happens at some schools in Japan as well.
Yeah.
Teachers has to be guard sometimes, or police.
Yes.
But it's for primary schools usually, or lower secondary.
Yes. And this is very curious. But a lot of times this work is created just to be fair in the sense that everyone has to work and do something else. I mean, this is a very narrow sense of fairness, right? What's fair is to let people do what they can do, not to make everyone do the same thing. But I'm coming from a different perspective. I know that where I've worked, there is this very narrow sense of fairness. What is fair is that everyone does the same thing. Everyone has the same amount of hours. Everyone pulls the same amount of weight as a teacher. Everyone as a student takes the same test. So, I mean, this is a very kind of, this is a sense of fairness.
In Asian context.
I don't know what context it is, but this came from my experience where I've argued that certain classes maybe need different types of assessment. No, but what is fair is all 5 classes, all 200 students take the same test. It might be fair that some people who are inept, like really inept teachers, like teachers who can't teach, but because they're long-term teachers, because they can't be fired, Just don't give them any work. No, you have to give them work, so you make them stand out in the parking lot during an assembly. I mean, they just hold a piece of rope. That's not fair. Oh, no, it's fair because he has to pull the same weight as everyone else. No, but he's dumb. I mean, this is, again, this is a very curious sense of fairness. And I've seen that in my career here in Hong Kong. I'm not sure if I would see it elsewhere.
Interesting.
Mm.
Your way of seeing these kind of duties of teachers. I think this is my first time to hear that because of the fairness under the name of fairness, they create new jobs or create unnecessary jobs.
Yeah.
Usually, teachers will say that for the sake of students, you got to go out and walk around and see whether students are doing something wrong or not.
My argument is maybe many people aren't in touch with their core underlying belief. That is, if another teacher were not doing that, there'd be jealousy.
Oh,
or there would be.
That's true. Yes, that's
There'd
true.
be something like, "Oh, you're lazy," or "You're shining someone's shoes, sucking up to someone." I mean, that's a good test too. So, yeah, I think it is this very curious sense of fairness that everyone has to. If one person has to suffer, everyone has to suffer, and everyone has to believe they're suffering.
Oh, understand. Quite interesting.
That's about it.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
No problem. We are live. My name is David, and we've just finished our interview.